So one of the things I would look at, and just I take away as I'm hearing both Jim and Dave, you're talking about where you see the clouds, it seems like it shifts our mindset as leaders in our organizations. In the past, we spent times focusing on the problems, and we became problem solver mentalities. And it seems like what we're now shifting, that 20%, is more about the innovation. It's about more looking for solutions and opportunities. Do you think that's the reality of what's happening? Is that the organizations are more becoming opportunistic versus problem solvers?
Yeah, I mean, I take a first shot at it, and I'll let Jim. So, 2.5, 3 years, right? A healthcare organization was forced to become work from home.
Yeah.
And part of the need to still survive and still serve and still take care of the patient one way or the other. And that now has created this kind of momentum, if you will, that hey, technology does solve a lot of things. Change does happen quickly if we were to put time around it. And we have now adapted this new way. The new way is that we can do a lot of things remotely. You can leverage cloud, and it has its levers around data and security. It does give you all the tools, the Swiss Army knife, if you will. So in my mind, the next 3 years is where if an organization starts putting their effort into, hey, in the last 3 years, this is where we kind of came from whatever the level was to the new way of conducting business. Hey, if we get intentional around this, so there's no external forces that tells us that we have to be work from home, what are the things that we need to do to be more agile and more innovative, right? And then a lot of things can fit in there, right? Clouds, it's a piece of it, but the strategy and the overall roadmap.
Yeah, I love it. So first of all, I love the word intentional. Anytime you use the word intentional, it wins brownie points for me, Dave. So that's good. So Jim, let's kind of switch a little bit for internal business drivers. So there's external things that are forcing us to the cloud and making it more convenient for us to go to the cloud. But there's reasons internally why we want to drive and move ourselves to the cloud. And what I heard, with Dave's, final comment there was this fact that we're able to switch on the dime to go from being everybody comes into an office, everyone, comes and sees a doctor in the office, in a visiting room. And literally overnight, because of the investments that we've made in the last few years, most organizations were able to switch, pivot, create a whole new way of doing business during some very difficult times. So I think we were talking in one of our planning sessions about the word of scalability. So kind of help me understand how scalability as a business driver internally that's helping us move forward, how cloud impacts that.
So historically, scalability from an IT standpoint was always mapped out over the course of several years. So if you were buying storage or compute, disk space, laptops, whatever it was, you were kind of projecting how many you would need over time. And when it came to the on-prem data structure and infrastructure, you would buy in bulk with the expectation that that would carry you through the capital life cycle of the equipment. And that meant a big investment over time, and then the capitalization of that investment over a period of time. And in many cases, the estimates were wrong. Whether they were overshot, undershot, whatever the case may be, you always had some variable that wasn't clear at the time that the estimates were being made. And quite honestly, estimates over a 5-year depreciation cycle for a server, that's a heavy lift to ask. So from a cloud perspective, scalability is close to instantaneously right now as it gets. In many cases, it does still take a little bit of planning because of the pricing and the way that those things are charged. You don't want to just turn on a server and say, if it ever maxes out, just make it bigger automatically. That's usually the most expensive way to deploy cloud. So I'm not going to say that there's an elimination of the planning step, but your ability to scale from both up and down is greatly improved. And so if there is a significant change in the business internal or external business needs, the cloud infrastructure can pivot and move with that very quickly. And I point the downside to it because that is really one of the big advantages. I mean, unless you were going to have your own yard sale or something with on-prem infrastructure, the used market for that equipment was never great. Mostly terrible, hard to deal with. Removing your data, eliminating your data from the hardware that you were going to put on the secondary market, all really, really painful things for an IT leader. And it's about having the right advisors. And so I know that there are, some technology people on here, and it sounded like there were some, non-technology people on here. I think the term that we use was having aligned advisors, from that perspective. And that goes with capacity, strategy. The strategy still needs to be multi-year. A lot of small business IT strategies is 12 months at a time. That's not really adequate in this environment. And to your earlier point, I don't know that I agree with that we've gone from being problem solvers to innovators. I just think that the problems come much quicker now, and we have to solve them. The time to market expectations is much quicker, that it feels like we're being innovative, but in reality, we're just solving problems faster. And so I think having the right people involved with that. So if you don't have that person on staff, if there isn't a CIO or some other executive in the business platform, making sure that you don't have an unaligned vendor in the driver's seat for that plan and that strategy is important to making sure that those internal business drivers are being recognized and that the solutions to address them are being met.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, right? I think the difference is today we have to be a lot more strategic in what we're doing. And so the days of where the value of IT is running IT, making sure it's up and running and that it's stable, is important, but it's less important than actually having the people set the direction of where we want to go. And what I would say is different from my perspective. Before, you had to do a lot of really, really detailed planning, design, architecture work. And you had to hope that you got it right, because you're making investments today that need to last you 3 or 5 years. What I'm seeing today that's different is I can actually look at an application. I don't have to make a multi-million-dollar investment to test it and do a proof of concept. I can go out and find an application that solves a very specific need. And I did this a while back with, expense management for travel expenses. Go out, buy one license, test it. I'm spending $20 a month while I'm doing my testing for 3 months. I prove that it works. I get the integrations working, and then boom, I light it up. And now I have the whole organization up and running in 2 months with no really heavy upfront in cost. But I knew I had to solve that problem. It just made it easier to get there. So this kind of rapid prototyping, proof of concept was a lot easier today than it was back. So I can be more responsive. I can react faster.
I can give you a real world example.
Okay.
So I have in my current organization, an application that's dependent on a SQL database. We implemented a change that, of course, in the test environment tested out fine. But once we got it up to production volume, there was a query that was extremely hardware, memory, and processor intensive. And had we been in a fixed environment, we would have had to roll that change back and brought back with it a whole bunch of stuff that we really needed.
Yeah.
Instead, we were able to add processors and memory to the SQL server, and the end users never really even knew that we had a problem. We ran that way for about a week. We fixed the code. We got it pushed back out, and no one was ever the wiser. And we did that with a few $100s worth of cloud resource consumption that would have cost the business thousands of dollars if we would have had to roll back.
Yeah, and then you would have had to still make the investment in the hardware design to beef up the processors. You fix the code. There's all kinds of stuff you had to do that would have taken time and moved your organization backwards.